Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. We have a really good panel discussing the key issues and criteria that one considers when looking at investments in orphan rare diseases. We have a great group of panelists with diverse backgrounds and also firms that they represent, both corporate and private equity. And hopefully this will be a very informative discussion for you. Feel free to interrupt and ask any questions you may have instead of waiting to the end. I want to keep this as more of a discussion rather than an interrogation session, although I see some lamps up there. So we start with introductions. Let's start with Thierry and work our way back here, and you know, just a short introduction about yourself and why you are involved in this space and how you are affiliated to the fund that you're talking about today.
Okay, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me first. So my name is Thierry Logel. I'm managing director, managing partner of Kurma Partners, a venture capital organization based in Paris, France. This is a company I created now 7 years ago. So it's an independent venture capital firm. We have under management approximately 250 million euros. We do both therapeutics and diagnostics medtech. Of course, therapeutics is a major area, more important than the other side. And just to go to the orphan space, because of course this is the core interest of a session today. We have started investing in rare diseases without knowing it was a real sector 20 years ago. We were early stage investors in Europe in a company called Actelion, which was doing by chance rare diseases, even though they were starting thinking they would develop a new anti-hypertension drug and finally become a very successful $1 billion revenue generating drug for pulmonary hypertension and actually the first successful rare disease investment we had done. So since then we have actively invested in the space and of course with I would say most of the actors of the industry more and more, and eventually raised a fund in 2013 which was not totally entirely dedicated to the space but clearly biased to invest preferentially in the space, and we received the sponsorship of a corporate partner who invested heavily in the fund, which is GSK. And then we raised a specific fund, started in 2013, and we developed a portfolio of 12 companies which are actually in majority of the space. So this is an introduction of our bias and interest for the space.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rashida Sinha, and I'm a Senior Director of Investments with Sanofi Ventures. Sanofi has had a long-term interest in rare diseases, and Genzyme has really been the kind of the core growth engine for that. And so from an investment perspective, that is one of the core pillars of our investments in both in therapeutics, biopharma, but also in biomarker development, as well as some digital health initiatives. And so I invest across all of those sectors. And then in terms of our investments in rare diseases, we have a number of portfolio companies and investments in this space. We are now starting to seed companies in the space as well, so partnering with academic institutions.
My name is Nick Simon, and I'm the Managing Director at Claris Ventures. Claris Ventures, I was one of the founding partners back in 2005. We're currently operating on our third fund. We have a total of 1.7 billion under committed capital under management. We've funded approximately 50 companies to date, about 5 to 6 of them in the orphan space. So it isn't a major thrust in terms of our business, but but our business is focused on funding drugs going forward, and it is a space that we've monitored and really look at in a very proactive manner because of a number of the attractiveness that goes behind it. And to that end, a number of our companies actually have worked their way through, and part of the attractiveness of the Orphan space is the fact that it is an area where you can focus, actually fund the company as a private company all the way from prior to going into the clinic all the way through. It has been a very attractive spot for us.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bro Vampares. I'm an investment director at Merck Ventures. Merck Ventures being the corporate VC arm of Merck. Merck, the German Merck, so the Merck that is known here in the US as Indi Serono. Merck Ventures is a 300 million euro fund. We invest half of that fund in therapeutics investments. Those therapeutic investments fall within a number of restricted therapeutic areas that are of relevance to us and to our corporate model. These are oncology, immuno-oncology, autoimmunity, and fertility. Because certainly in the first three ones, there's quite a number of orphan indications that's certainly of high relevance to us. It's not that we, for sure, purely focus on orphan indications, but a lot of the companies that we look at have one or more of their pipeline programs focusing on rare diseases.
Hi, my name is Ken Kingathran. I'm the rare one of the lot because I not only do investments but also run a company, a portfolio company. I'm currently president and interim CEO of a company called Orphan. It's a cardiovascular company. Also chairman of another company called Nexion, which is a gastrointestinal drug development company. I run a small fund, incubator fund called Athenos Capital, where we primarily are involved in setting up companies ourselves and fund it in the early stages, and then take it to a point where institutional investors, such as the folks here, come in and take the company forward. Mainly because many of us who are involved in the fund have set up companies, and we know how difficult it is to go around an idea and a PowerPoint presentation trying to get early funding. It's always better to get data as we move along and attract funders, institutional investors. I have a particular interest in orphan rare diseases because it's an area that's ideal for small companies, small startup, focused on taking the product as far as possible, i.e. phase 2, in some cases phase 3, for the kinds of investments that you can get from folks like the folks at this table. And I co-chair a global congress on orphan rare disease. There are two of them, one in Europe and also in the US. It occurs during March in Europe and September in the US. Okay, with that, so let's start with the most basic question. Let's start with Nick. What is the major interest for you, for your fund in this space? Because not too long ago, people were not investing in orphan rare disease. What changed and what happened in the last, say, 5 years when nowadays you can't walk into a VC without an orphan rare in your pipeline?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that happened. First of all, way back in the early 90s, you had this Orphan Drug Act, which encouraged people to go ahead and try to encourage companies to go ahead and invest in the orphan space by giving them market exclusivity even when the product didn't have a patent to go ahead and protect the product. So that was actually sort of brought some attention to the specific area. But then you started to see a couple of companies such as Genzyme that actually showed that not only is this a space that you can get some additional patent protection, but you also can make a lot of money out of the space. And even though there might be a small number of patients that are relative to some of the traditional drugs that you pursue, you can actually garner a very high premium for these prices for these specific drugs, because in many cases they actually do have a fundamental impact on these patients. And in most of the products that are out there, it actually is saving the lives of people or extending the lives of people who have these unfortunate rare diseases on top of that. And then I think the third element behind it is that in order for us to actually garner value, is basically taking the product. You can actually take a product that is in the preclinical stages or even prior to the clinical stage, and fund it in a relatively timely fashion all the way through approval without going through the tens, if not hundreds of not thousands of patients in terms of the clinical validation required for FDA approval. And then last is that these are typically relatively well-defined markets that you can actually go ahead and proceed either with a partner, or it's very, very straightforward to go ahead and set up a sales and marketing operation by themselves. So from an investment perspective, and that enables it to compete quite effectively with a lot of other investment opportunities in the market.
And perhaps Rashida, you could give us a corporate venture capital's perspective.
Yeah, so completely agree with all the points that Nick made. In addition, I would say the sheer size of the unmet need is a big driver, right? So when we talk about rare diseases, you guys probably know a lot of these statistics, but there are 7,000 rare diseases. Out of them, there are 400 that have any sort of treatable cure in the clinic, right? So think about that. That's a huge number of diseases that just have nothing. These patients have no options, and they have to live with these diseases, or a lot of them don't have very good lifespans either. So if you think about kids, a lot of these diseases disproportionately affect kids, right? So a total of 350 million patients worldwide, right? So it's, even though we call it rare diseases, and by each disease they affect small patient populations, but if you look at the total unmet need, it's tremendous, right? After figuring out the business model always has been a problem for pharma, which is why they hadn't focused, but once a couple of programs went through and they figured out the business model, that brought enough comfort, but also the next piece was trying to figure out how to market these drugs, because marketing for rare diseases and drugs for rare diseases is just completely different from marketing for other broader indications. So I think a lot of pharma companies have focused on that, have figured that out, and as a result, they are now focusing on building their pipeline in this space.
I mean, that's an interesting thing, because Sanofi, of course, through Genzyme, has inherited this being able to play in the orphan rare disease. And of course, Merck has not been playing in that space for a long time. So, and I do believe that the venture group, operates in a little different way to most of the other corporate ventures. So how is Merck dealing?
It's not that we don't play in where we don't play is the genetic hereditary diseases. That's not the focus of Merck as a corporate model, and that's also not the focus of us as a venture fund. But if you look at the pipeline of Merck at the moment, I mean, a big part of the pipeline today is avelumab, PD-L1 inhibitor for several indications. One of them, for example, Merkel cell carcinoma. It's a clear rare disease. So there, Merck is active in that space. What we do as a venture fund, we tend to invest in companies, mainly platforms that are today too early stage for Merck to be interested in, for the business development side for Merck to be interested in. So we place our bets there in that really early stage seed, Series A type of companies. As mentioned, often platforms. And there, alluding to what Nicholas said, is that, I mean, in order to employ your capital in an efficient way, an orphan disease there is a perfect way to showcase the potency of your platform, and then when that is successful, you can roll it out to other non-rare diseases. So we often look at rare diseases as some kind of showcase for capital efficient proof of concept of a platform.
I guess in some respect, by definition, if you're if you have oncology as a therapeutic area, you are in rare disease.
I mean,
5%.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think what I call the orphanization of oncology is what led to this amazing growth, and it's great for the patients. And likewise, I think the orphanization will happen in cardiovascular. It's already happening in neurology and GI and all these other areas. Any thoughts from you, Thierry, on the question here?
A lot have been said, of course, already. What I can maybe add is that for people like us who do lot of early stage funding. Orphan drugs offer something very special, which is in terms of science, of expertise, of access to innovation. It's the translational research factors, and when we want to access really innovative science in the rare disease space, often we talk to a few high-level centers of excellence where usually medical doctors treat patients during the day and do research during nighttime. And this is important for us to have this kind of translational research that hopefully can be translated quite efficiently to a drug candidate, a project, and sometimes to a company. And for, it was mentioned, the genetic diseases as a sub-area, and it is definitely a sub-area. And of course, the medical need is something essential when we talk about rare diseases. 7,000 diseases that are not treated or treatable for the moment is a challenge for all of us, without any doubt. And only the best science can offer a solution, or will offer a solution someday to treat this patient. And of course, this is part of what makes us excited about our job.
That's very excellent. Maybe this is a time to ask the audience a question. How many of you are actually currently trying to raise money for an orphan drug or rare disease story? There's quite a few. So you come to the right place. Let me ask anyone who's willing to dare to ask this question. What would you say, the biggest issue that you have when you pitch to folks, whether it be corporate or private equity folks? So what is that you've been hearing that you want, that you don't like about, that you would like to change? Who's willing to?
One question, and maybe a funny question, but when do you submit to apply for orphan status? If it's when you have data at phase 1, but it's safety data, does that say you really don't have sufficient data until phase 2? When is there an ideal time to submit to the FDA to get orphan classification?
I mean, you can really submit it just about any time before you get approval. But at the end of the day, you have to be the first to get approved in the United States to get that orphan status. But we typically, with our companies, as soon as, if they haven't already filed for orphan status, we want to make sure they do have orphan status before we actually make a fundamental investment. And so it's, I don't know if there's an ideal time, but at least us as investors, we'd like to know that up front. It's just sort of
even before phase 1?
Sure.
So at the last conference, I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Gayatri Rao, who is the head of the Orphan Division of the FDA, and I asked the same question. Basically, it is at any time. You have to show some data that makes sense from that indication point of view. As Nick pointed out, this is not a free ticket for exclusivity. Basically, if it's for instance a molecule that's that already exists that you just having a new use, unless you have patent protection around it, the first person, in fact, that the orphan designation will be given to another person, another company, sorry, and the first company that gets to market with it gets the exclusivity. So you have to be very, very careful about this. So that's why just the orphan designation alone is not helpful. Having some kind of patent protection is better. And by the way, orphan designation can be revoked, and it can be revoked upon challenge by another company as well. Because the challenge comes in the form of, have you met the criteria set for orphan designation? That's why patent protection also is very helpful in that respect. Any other, points that you faced that you felt was not fair or was not helpful?
How much extensive early stage data do you need before you fund?
Yeah, so I think it depends on your specific target, because nowadays, just because the space is getting more and more competitive, every investor, and be it corporate, institutional, is moving very distinct, right? So we just recently spun out are in the process of spinning out a company out of an academic institution. So very good, right? But having said that, we, at least for our purpose, we need to have, be able to replicate that data outside of an academic setting, right? And so, and being Sanofi and having those resources internally, we have the capability to do that. But that's a key criteria for us in going that early stages. We're going to replicate the data and make sure it works.
And just going back to the orphan designation, another thing that Dr. Rao mentioned is that, you know, when they are evaluating your orphan designation application, if they ever find any information on your website which suggests that it's going to be used for broader diseases, or some information hanging out there says that your drug could be used for a wide, you know, a larger population, you won't get the designation, even if you are applying for a niche indication. Be very, very careful about what you write out there, because they're forever. Maybe this is a question for Nick, and then Brad. Do you see an end to all the excitement around orphan designation, orphan drug investments, and if so, what do you think will be the watershed moment when things start going south?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's a watershed moment, but clearly the low-hanging fruit, like the enzyme replacement therapies, that's been pretty well vetted at this point in time. So many of the new or the rare diseases that really haven't been met at this point in time are becoming more challenging. So you really need to really dig into the mechanism of action to drive that forward. So that's becoming a bit more of a hurdle. I think probably the biggest threat or worry that the orphan space has at this point right now is that quite frankly, there is a lot of pressure that Congress is putting on this whole pricing issue that really came out of the spec pharma, the Valiants of the world, and our friends at Turing Pharmaceuticals, the knucklehead over there. But in light of that, as long as we can keep Congress somewhat rational and really focus on the unmet need and the fact that even though some of these products, I think Biogen's new orphan approval, they just announced it's going to be somewhere around, what is it, $375,000 a year type of thing. As long as you can actually show that this really is having an economic benefit to the health system, not just the fact that these patients are so desperate to have this that they're prepared to take that approach. I think we'll be okay, but that's probably the biggest threat at this point in time if they really start hammering the ability to get premium prices for particularly these very rare disorders.
And Rashida, any thoughts on whether you think this fund is going to last a long time, or is it just a fad?
So I agree from a price. The pricing is probably the biggest risk. I think from a science perspective, maybe ERTs are kind of getting saturated, but I don't think there is any dirt. There's lots of new technologies that are coming in, be it gene therapy, be it, So I think it definitely from a science perspective, you're not going to see that plateauing anytime soon. It really becomes a business model question.
I think I've heard this many times. Price and reimbursement and the regulatory path has been the big plus. Does that mean maybe it doesn't apply to pharma groups because they can always do the pricing analysis and bring in invest a lot of money and get those pricing reimbursement analysis done. But for venture capital, do you insist or at least ask the company to provide some kind of pricing analysis done, work done before they pitch to you, in addition to like the data? Maybe Thierry and Nick, you can comment on that.
Well, I usually come very early on in the life of a company, so we build the case all together usually. But of course, intuitively, it's when we build the case, intuitively at least, a little bit analytically, but very intuitively at the start, we can elaborate a business case where we are tackling a life-threatening disease, and we have a transformative drug that can cure a patient, and of course this has a price and a cost. Either it's not the case, and you can easily build a case on that, of course. So, no, usually for me, it's more very early stage. We are betting again on technology that can bring something transformative to the patient. So there are a lot of different cases there.
Yeah, I was, in the last 4 years, I've been involved in a company that's developing a therapy for congenital hyperinsulinism. It affects probably 150, 200 patients a year, new patients a year. And we do a pricing and reimbursement strategy on it. And the first thing you need to do is often educate the payers on the diseases, right? And then once you get them there and they understand how big the population you're treating, it's kind of a visual analog instinct with them in the sense that you can start down here and they go, I don't care. But there's a whole piece, I think, still along with payers. In some of these diseases, there's such a small population you're treating. It's de minimis on their bottom line. So they're doing a good thing, and it isn't really affecting economically, financially. So
Yeah, I've heard the same response. It's about what's the patient total patient population or the cost for that patient. Nick, when folks pitch to you, do you expect the company to have done some degree of pricing reimbursement analysis using external consultants? Many of folks that we know between us, as you know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They typically don't have a fully vetted analysis that we would invest behind it. They usually do at least make a case that it's relatively, it's the unmet need that they will meet if successful will be relative to some current surrogates that are out in the marketplace. Once we actually really dig in, then we will actually go out to some commercial folks that do a commercial analysis, which will include reimbursement. The other piece in these rare orphan diseases, very similar to like the Gaucher's diseases. And way back in the day when I was at Genentech, in the growth hormone deficiency market, you find out that you think the real patient population is very small, but then by the time you really start to educate the medical community to look for these various types of patients, all of a sudden that patient population can grow. And I think with the Gaucher's disease, it's almost been a 10 to 20-fold increase since they initially launched the product. So that's also been very successful. But yeah, when we go into a deal, we're looking at where once it gets approved, what kind of money can we expect out of that? That money really is directly. A big piece of that is how much we can get reimbursed with that once the product.
Maybe it's a question for Brand. A Dutch company was developing therapy for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. When they were doing a lot of work, very few people were in that space. But once they showed the path to approval, once they had figured out the endpoints, got EMA and FDA, then you had like 5-6 other companies. And the fact that these trials are small and you can get to market quickly, you can enable a competitor very fast. So in that respect, when you look at projects, do you focus on a project where they have to still figure out the clinical endpoint and have a negotiation with the FDA, or are you agnostic, or is it following the hurdle?
No, what we do as a fund, we really focus on first-in-class opportunities and on exciting biology. I mean, that's for us always the basis. So let's say on the whole pricing discussion that we just had, a lot of the companies that when at the moment that we invest in, that's just not relevant. Just to give you an example, the last investment that we did mid last year, Ionex Therapeutics, a German company, 40 million euro Series A financing round. What they essentially have is a platform technology, very potent platform to discover novel checkpoint inhibitors. At the moment of investment, there was only siRNA data available. Targets were discovered. No antibodies or no small molecules generated yet. So do we know what indication we will pursue? No, at the moment we don't. We will know that in 2 to 3 years down But it's very relevant for us to take these kind of opportunities and to invest in these kind of opportunities rather than invest in a company that say where you tend to focus on a best in class opportunity. So there we really want to see first in class exciting biology, and that's what excites us.
And Thierry, what do you think about the advantages and disadvantages of investing in orphan and rare disease stories from your point of view?
Okay, I think we have already talked briefly about the advantages, which is first, I would say, the high unmet need. We are targeting patients that desperately need a treatment, and this is the mission of the industry. First of all. Second is, of course, about the process of developing a drug. It's usually quite clear how to what the target population is, and of course, in some case, it's often the case, the development timelines are shorter than for another kind of drug, so this is clearly an advantage. On the same level, the discussion with regulatory bodies are often easier because, of course, they have the same mission of facilitating the introduction of new solutions for patients that need it. So these are, and pricing, of course, because of companies like Genzyme, it has been shown that we can generate enough economics with rare diseases such that you can make money even though the population of patients is thousands or more or less 1,000 or a few thousand patients. I will maybe add just one disadvantage because this is something we are now getting a bit used to, is when you are tackling especially the ultra rare diseases space, you're tackling with diseases that you don't know perfectly. So many of the times when you are starting developing a drug, you are learning as much about the disease that you are learning about the advantage or disadvantage of your profile of your drug. So this may take time as well, but it's something you need to be prepared that what you know about the disease is probably not totally true. And when testing the drug, first in patient, you will learn a lot about the disease as well as you will learn about the drug.
Maybe another time for another poll. Of the folks who are looking for money, how many of you don't have what should I say, how many of you are looking for money that is non-oncology related stories? There's only one. And also, how many of you are looking for money that's not for oncology? Rare disease. Oh wow, that's interesting. I at one point thought the majority of the rare disease stories are really oncology related. Nick, any thoughts on that? I mean, you see when you see proposals coming through, are they mainly oncology or half and half, or is it now other diseases coming in?
So we actually don't view oncology as sort of a rare disease. I mean, it is because it's getting more personalized, and as we understand the disease a lot better in the populations, particularly since they're mostly mutational generated, are becoming more like orphan-like. So we don't really categorize those, but quite frankly, in the oncology space, I'd say 80% of the opportunities today that we see that come in or we correctly go after are in the oncology space. It's just because there's been such a fundamental change in the science in that area. But in the opportunities that are associated with those records. But in terms of the traditional orphan, we would consider more non-oncology orphan diseases. We actually have seen a bit of a downturn with that, with the actual number of new opportunities that have actually come in. And my guess is that, again, a lot of the low-hanging fruit, such as the enzyme replacement space, has been pretty well harvested at this point in time. And now you're really going after these more challenging rare diseases, and to get that to a point of validation for us to go and invest in, the hurdle's gotten a little bit higher.
Any thoughts from you, Graham?
both?
I guess from our side, our deal flow might be biased a little bit because a lot of parties out there, of course, know that we have, let's say, a limited scope concerning therapeutic areas. So do we get to see a lot of genetic disease companies? No, we don't. I guess today, if you look at our deal flow, we get around 500-600 business plans per year, I think. Around 60-70% of that is oncology, and a lot of that oncology is immuno-oncology. So we get to see a lot of companies in that space. But again, our deal flow might be biased just because a lot of people know that we don't play in the genetic disease field, for example.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because I've heard that from quite a few, and I don't know if Sanofi decided they didn't want to look at gene therapy related, or did I read that correctly?
I was going to say, on the contrary, the overlap between Bram's deal flow and ours is probably minimal because we're interested in specifically rare genetic diseases and not as much as oncology related, but more traditional rare diseases. Lysosomal storage disorders, LSDs are a big focus area for us. There is a lot of low-hanging fruit that has already been picked in that, but we will continue to.
But what about gene therapy related story? Because the big question is, how do you price it? I mean, you can't just go and bill somebody a $2 million price tag because it's a single incident of therapy, right? So how do you factor in, that element of it, or have you just simply not? Have you decided that we're not going to look at any gene therapy related stories, or is that something we'll deal with it later?
Yeah, but I don't have an answer to your question because we haven't found a company that's compelling enough from a science perspective to make an investment and then get to that stage of how do you make it work. So yeah, it's early days.
But it's like cross the bridge when you come to it. You had a question.
I wanted to turn to the last question about oncology, the one that just asked. What indication would you be most interested in if you got to choose one? In each one's perspective, in the orphan space. In the orphan space. I mean, not oncology, but any of the others. One? Yeah. Well, big two if you want to. I think that's it.
I got that.
Actually, he stole my question. My next question: what are the top 3 areas that you want to? You say I want to invest
So
in?
I just mentioned LSDs are a very important big focus area. Lehman's pick disease, that's a big area of interest for us. That's it. I guess from a pure disease area, but then we are looking at technologies associated, right? So that's our other lens.
I think what areas you really want to?
Well, I mean, the one area that we recently, I can't say this is an area that we said this is the most important area to go after, but we've been very closely working with the Broad Institute in terms of in the Stanley Center there, which has been focusing on the genetic basis of neuropsych disorders, and we've just funded this one company that is focused on the genetic diseases related to neuropsych disease, the initial approach on a number of these rare epilepsy type of patient populations that go into it, but that's actually a very high risk, we think high reward, because we haven't really intervened on these with these specific targets. We're just starting to do that at this point in time. I mean, the most attractive would be the ones such as like where you've actually seen and you know that if you intervene with that specific gene itself, that you will actually have a profound therapeutic impact.
Probably the other thing to mention is our preference would be diseases that are life-threatening and do not have any cure. So for first in class, right? Certain diseases which target a larger population, you could be a second line, but mostly our preference would be first.
Brad, any areas?
Yeah, I guess from our side, and sorry to repeat myself here a little bit, but we mainly look at it from the technology angle. So if you come to us with, let's say, the next gen CAR T company, for example, very exciting. Are we focused on what is the indication or the first indication that you should go for? A lot of the companies at the moment that we look at them, the science is just too early stage to make a decision on that, so we will decide on that down the road. So I don't really have a a checklist here of what let's say the 3 most exciting clinical areas are. We really focus first on the biology, and then we look what, based on that biology, what the best application is to choose validation for that particular platform.
The orphan drug rare disease space, there have been really amazing exits, both M&A and also, public markets. Nick, do you think, just by showing a couple of examples of both M&A as well as IPO, do you think this is going to sort of carry on or get bigger and bigger over time?
Oh, definitely. I mean, again, it's to the extent the business model holds, where you can actually charge a very high premium, even though it is a relatively small patient population. You can make a very credible case, whether it be in the public markets or potential acquirer, that you can turn many of these opportunities into $1 billion, if not multi-billion dollars opportunities. I mean, look at, Alexion has a $30 million market cap right now with a patient population that was initially started out in the hundreds. And then, you talked about Actelion with their approach, and remember the interview they with PAH and their acquisition by Roche. So I think those are going to play both publicly as well as from a potential acquisition target, if you can make the case that you really truly are serving a significant unmet need, and you can charge enough of a premium to turn these into $1 billion product.
Now, the last few minutes, maybe what we can talk about is, what is the process a potential investee company needs to go through for each of your firms? Because I'm pretty sure they are different. And so you can give some kind of guide to the folks here as to how they need to reach and get things going. So maybe we'll brand and we'll work our way.
Okay. No, sure. Happy to explain a little bit. I mean, first of all, I think we're very easy to reach if you just go to our website, Merck Ventures, and all of our email addresses, and I think maybe even our phone numbers are on there. So that's a deliberate choice that you can easily reach each of us and not have to pause via assistance. On the investment process, I think we as a corporate venture fund, just to explain that a little bit, I think we work very similar to the typical private fund. So we do our due diligence. We like to make use of people from Merck itself for that due diligence purposes. I think there's a lot of smart scientists in Merck, and it's very easy for us to reach out to. And I think that also, if you compare corporate venture funds to private venture funds, I think that's also one of the advantages that we can offer to companies that we look at and that we invest in. Is just the easy reach out and the introductions that we can make to the corporate mother, helping them to further challenge their business plan and fine-tune their business plan in order to maximize the value. So a typical investment process, I mean, it's difficult to put some general numbers here, but I mean, that can start from a few months of between getting to or having the first meeting with the company till the closing of the financing round. I mean, there are cases where it can last for more than a year. We, as a corporate venture fund, we always syndicate with other parties, of course. That can be private VCs, corporate VCs. There we're agnostic. We have, let's say, a focus on both Europe as well as the US. Of the 25 portfolio companies that we have, 5 of them are in the US, the rest is spread out all over Europe. The biggest part of the team is also in Europe at the moment. So we're a little bit more European focused in the last years than we maybe were before. But still we look very actively towards the US. Would we take let's say the lead in a financing round in a US company? At the moment, I don't think so, just because our presence there is not large enough. So we'd like to follow with let's say the top US VCs that we have good connections with. But I mean, in general terms, we work pretty similar to any private VC concerning due diligence. Concerning terms that we request, important thing that I always like to stress is that in an equity stake from Merck Ventures has no strings attached whatsoever. So don't expect us to have any discussions on option rights or whatever. We purely invest on terms that are similar, identical to private VCs.
Yeah, so it's very similar from our perspective. Usually, to be honest with you, we probably see on average about 20 deals a week. So that's about 1,000 different deals at a given point in time. So usually the ones that we really get traction with, it's usually about, I'd say about 150 we really dig in on. Either to come through our networks or people who are introduced through our networks, and so it's always advantageous if you know of somebody who knows of somebody within the firm. It's always advantageous to have them come in. But a very similar process in terms of diligence. We usually try to, once we decide that this is an area we want to dig into, we usually try to make an initial assessment within 2 to 3 weeks after the initial meeting, and then from that we usually start to talk terms at that point. And if we can get on the same page with terms, we go to the final diligence, which is usually about another 3 to 4 week process.
I think things are very similar, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. The two things I will add is my one piece of advice to you guys is just do your research when you're raising regarding investors. So you noticed here that Bram doesn't invest in rare genetic diseases that I do. So if you are in the rare genetic disease space, you should be talking to me instead of Bram, right? So do your diligence on the investors, because you're wasting your time just casting a broad nest. And most investors will tell you they invest in rare genetic diseases or rare diseases on their website, but that's all they're going to say. So talk to them first to figure out exactly what their focus areas are. My second piece of addition, I would say, which is more a process-related thing internally for us, is our first smell test is really the science and the data. And so the good news is I'm not evaluating your data and from a scientific perspective. We have a lot of experts internally, and they really help us do the first smell test if something passes from a science perspective.
Thierry, sorry, 30 seconds.
No. We do investment in rare diseases, so this is my final word. So if you have a good project in the field, don't hesitate and contact me. And again, science is critical. We judge first science and the medical need and how science can correlate with what we want to develop.
And my final words, these folks are on the table are very critical to having the orphan drug and rare disease space move forward. I know how hard it is because there are several projects that I am very interested in funding, but I just did not get many of the angel investors to come along because you need sophisticated investors to know what works and what doesn't. So with that, I really want to thank the panelists for talking to us. And if you have any questions, please talk to them on a one-on-one. Thanks so much.